what inspired you to start Citrus?
Stayed in the US, away from parents, and quite a few of my friends who had chronic illnesses for their parents while they were there, and they were not able to find alternatives to take care of their parents. India as a country would get older and older, and do we have the right structural elements in place? So do not have really good trained professionals who could take care of the elderly people, caregivers, geriatric care managers. Think of them as an equivalent of healthcare equivalent of an air hostess for an airline industry, or a front desk manager of a five-star hotel. We are going to pay at least 45,000 per month the moment the training is done and the moment they're connected to the elderly people. Did rise close to $60,000 from the market and put in another 40,000 from the personal money to pilot the project.
First of all, wanted to know what inspired you to start Citrus, and what about your background helped you actually create it. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Super. So the idea for Citraverse healthcare came or got incubated somewhere in the November of 2023 when I was doing the Bill 3 accelerator cohort. And I happened to meet my co-founder Ganga, who has worked in the wellness industry for long. And both of us individually had circled down elder care as a space that one could work on for multiple reasons. Ganga had worked on maternity care, and she saw a lot of her skill sets are going to be applicable in the elderly care space. I was coming from more on the business and the personal angle in terms of having stayed in the US, away from parents, and quite a few of my friends who had chronic illnesses for their parents in India while they were there, and they were not able to find alternatives to take care of their parents. Now, and then of course, there is a natural, economic and social science studies that I got exposed to while I was doing my master's, which gave us a clear indication that India as a country would get older and older, and do we have the right structural elements in place, not just government doing its own thing, but then how does the private place respond to it, and what is the level of our quality in each of the structures required for a good geriatric care. Those are the questions that are always there, and we then looked at what kind of business model that we could figure for the present context, which is in tune with what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. And those are the ideas, those are the discussions that and research that we were doing during that particular initial stage, and then we circled on. After the deep market research, we understood that along with the tech ecosystem that's required for capturing the data of the elderly, one also do not have really good trained professionals who could take care of the elderly people. And for various reasons, the present players who had a foothold in the market, they did not invest on it, probably because it's much more costlier, and the market segments that they were targeting were not paying them much, and which led to a lot of attrition levels on the people that they could bring in to do the job. And it was a vicious cycle. And literally every one that we spoke to for a long period of time, close to say 40 to 50 odd people, kept saying the same thing, that they had to change 10 to 15 people from various agencies or the other startups that they were hiring the caregivers, and it was an extremely frustrating process. So then from there, it dawned upon, let's focus on a small segment of Indian population, which is the wealthier elites or say NRIs who would be able to afford a structural caregiving for their elderly parents? And if so, what would it look like? And from that question was framed, and then we imagined what sort of training that got to go through, that both US and Europe has already done it because the society is far more older there. And then we put in a training module. We put in a web workflow that has to complement it, and that's how we started working. And we raised funds with Bill 3 and other foreign investors for a pilot in Bangalore.
Right. And so you mentioned there are other startups that are doing this. So I was keen to know, when I was doing my research, there was a startup called Yodo Elder Healthcare. I might be familiar with this. So what really makes you stand out apart? What was your critical insight that made you stand out? Is it the quality of the service? Is it the product that you're the tech product that you're building on it? What makes you stand out from your competitors?
So the major gap over there, which was also, I think, they found very difficult, all the existing players difficult to crack, is that they work on inherent assumption that India is not ready to pay for the elderly care service. And it's partly true because frankly, 70% of the country lives with just 10,000 rupees per month, income, and there is a good percentage of middle class, but it's still smaller, and they are focused on the daily needs, and there's a very small segment of well-to-do section in the country, right? Now, the problem with that assumption is that even the small percentage of well-to-do people here in India is much bigger than what is in the Middle East. It is will fast rise to equal Southeast Asian nations and East Asia eventually, as we get richer in the next 5 to 10 years, because the transition to the middle-income economies is happening. Now, even for them, even with the present constraints that the market has, my simple theoretical rebuttal is that that is that small section of people. Now, I would say that whether it's 1 lakh or 2 lakh potential customers, who it is, but that there is enough substantial number of people in that particular segment who are elderly folks whose kids happen to be away and who actively need someone like this. Now, even if when they go and look for the services, the major problem with all the services is, as I earlier said, there is literally no training that would happen for a caregiver. Of course, nurses, wherever they offer, they come from trained institutes and expertise, so they could attend to the elderly person for, say, example, a surgery happens and taking care got to be done for a certain month. But then what happens after that, when the person is alone and the person needs continuous care over a period of time? What about the companionship and many of the other elements of the care that's required as a person gets older? That is broadly attended to them by they creating someone called care assistant. But unfortunately, care assistants continue to remain blue collar job. And it was paid very less money, for example, say 15,000 rupees per month. And these startups end up charging the customers 35,000. Naturally, certain money goes into their operation, certain money they have to give to their partners or agencies, which get the people. And then, of course, the people get the remaining money. Right now, what happens in that cycle is that 15,000 is an extremely less amount of money for a skill set which requires not only empathy, but it requires patience and very extracting work, to be with elderly person, to continue to go with the care plan and to do it in a proper manner. Now, that's where the problem is, right? Because it's paid very less, there is no training, because training costs. And also there is literally no control over the choices that people can make, because you cannot have professional way of in and out. I mean, like, people attrition will be far more higher, because the moment they find a better job, they will switch to it and they will not continue to stay with, because they have to stay in the other houses for 24 hours all the time, right? So naturally, in that particular scenario, the two-pronged problem was that the quality of the caregiving for the customer, the elderly person, they are not able to first create. Second, the people are also, who want to do it, they always felt that they're paid less and they're just extremely less motivated. Now, it's easier for us then to simply say that, look, I think let's not go for the mass market. Let's be very niche. Let's do an organic growth, but let's get the system right for the very small segment of people. And what are these things that we got to do, which is very similar to any skill sets. Like, you and I went to school, we learned writing, we learned certain things about management, we try to apply. Similarly, what all goes into caregiving? Psychological elements, geriatric elements, reading and writing ability, so that they could have situational awareness. Those themes were then put in as a training element. They go through a 2 months rigorous training, and then they come out to be a far more sophisticated, well-trained folks who can attend to the elderly care. So that is exactly where we add in a huge value, and that is where we also then get the quality right. We then be able to create the trust that's secured with the elderly person and its family, right? So that is probably, I think we are the only player who are trying to operate in that particular segment at this point.
Right. So yeah, it seems like how you're setting yourself apart is in two ways, where you're targeting a layer of India which is quite wealthy, who can afford premium services. But at the same time, I think even more important is, if it's successful, you're going to be changing what caregiving means in India, because you're training. I think primarily Ganga is working on this, because you mentioned that she has a background in healthcare. So the training of these, I think it's right to call them heroes in a way, right? They're caregiving heroes, because I think this particular section of people they've not been given their due credit. When I'm like, you mentioned this as well, and I've been doing some research. Salaries are quite low. Attrition rate is high, because they're not being treated well within a household. They're made to do jobs that are beyond the scope of what they're required to do, and just basically a jack of all trades, right? So could you go more into what sets your caregivers, these heroes, apart, in terms of the training that they receive? How are they before, and how do they come after their training? What is their background? What are the typical backgrounds that they come from? So just could you go more into that?
Yeah. So we call our caregivers geriatric care managers, because that is broadly the profile that we're trying to create. And think of them as an equivalent of healthcare equivalent of an air hostess for an airline industry, or a front desk manager of a five-star hotel, right? And what are the skill sets that they got to have? I mean, excellent articulate ability, which means that fundamental reading and writing ability. Now, that is a kind of a rigor that the test through which that we open it up to different candidates who are interested in caregiving, and then we let them come through that particular process. They have to clear that in some sense. Once they clear that, I mean, like, that could be anyone, be it a graduate of computer science, be it a graduate of management, be it a graduate from the healthcare industry or hospital industry or anywhere. And why they would apply? Because it's going to be aspirational. It's going to be far more high-paying job, right? We are going to pay at least 45,000 per month the moment the training is done, and the moment they're connected to the elderly people, along with the accommodation and the food being taken care of at the customer's place. So So then the pool of at least the basic level of a kind of a rigor that's already been applied in terms of recruiting them. Once that's been done, we have various partners coming in. The major partner who gives the geriatrics 101, we have a partner in Bangalore who takes them through what happens to the human physiology as we get older, and what all kind of illnesses that happen, and in what sense that the response got to be in terms of when you're around it. Now, that is something that all of us should have. For example, you, me, as our parents get older, I mean, like what happens? Anyone could go and do it, but then it's just fundamental, basic geriatrics course, right? Once they do that, we also then expose them to psychology 101 in terms of they don't become psychotherapists naturally, but then they'll be able to have empathetic conversation and good listening skills. And then they go through extensive reading and writing skill sets enhancement, which is taken by me, which follows multiple standards of how to write as clearly as possible, as brief as possible. And how do we narrate these stories to different stakeholders? For example, they go to the doctor, they read the report, they summarize it, and then how do they send it to their adult kids who are staying in the US? Or they update Citraverse. Or if the next visit to the doctor, all the minor details that they note down, how do they tell it to the doctor themselves? So that again gets covered, right? Then of course the communication and etiquette elements, which is a standard thing that got covered in terms of how to be polite and groomed and presentable at all jobs, right? So now what happens once they go through this is that we call them an equivalent of an Alfred from a Batman movie, where they're far more sophisticated, they're situationally aware, they're trained for all the emergent situations, and because it's a geriatric training, they have all the 5 prone roles that they could do, which is the personal hygiene of the elderly person they could cover, which is bathing them, cleaning them, grooming the individual, taking care of their bed and the hygiene part of that particular room. The nutrition part of it, which is that they are not going to cook, but then there'll be a cook at the home. They'll be able to, on a daily basis, based on the care plan they would have discussed with the doctor, they would know, I mean, like what kind of nutrients that they got to have, and then the nutrition being prepared and being managed daily. They'd be able to always update all the day-to-day data, both physical and emotional data, into our app, because they're very much digital savvy in some sense. And at the same time, they will also be situationally aware and could be a companion in the travels of the elderly people, because they're still cognitively far more active in the doctor visits, in multiple other day-to-day affairs that they got to have, except for the finance or very personal elements that the kids and the elderly people got to do. But all the other basic work that they got to do in terms of, say, paying the bills or ensuring that the house is more like a chief of staff thing, getting it covered for the elderly person in some sense, reminding it and then giving it to them. So now what happens is that the caregiving aspect of is getting fully covered, the companion part of it is getting fully covered, the kind of a representative of this adult kit for the parent, and being a conduit has been very well done, because they are equipped to do it. That is what then we aim to skill up the people. And our web platform, which is also going to be an app, is going to give a complete transparency of, on a day-to-day basis, what all activities happening. So every single day the kids would be able to see what has happened, and every single week they'll be able to review it with the care coordinator and the geriatric care manager. So through that, the adult kids get their peace of mind, the elderly people get their dignity and independence, and naturally also the geriatric care managers, their life is substantially improved, right? Because now it's a white collar job. It is professionally done. It has its agreement. It has the protections both on the elderly person side and also on the employee side, because abuses could be far more lesser, because it's very much a formal agreement, and the boundaries are very much delineated.
So two questions here. Do you think that you mentioned that computer science graduates, management consultants, they would apply for the caregiving role? So for me, it's not very evident how their skill sets in these courses and how they were, why would they transition from being a computer science graduate to a caregiver? The second question is, let's say, for example, there's a caregiver is who who resonates well with a elderly patient. What prevents the patient from just saying that, hey, we're just going to hire this person, not go through your platform? So the playing devil's advocate here. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, on the question number one, any field is aspirational the moment we are able to make that particular job better in some sense, right? For example, if you look at who goes into hospitality sector per se, right? Of course, you could immediately say, hey, hotels and a bunch of other places, they probably need a hospitality degree to go into that particular domain. But not necessarily that, when, people, say like, say Deep Kalra starts a travel company, or say someone like Varun, who gets into sustainable business based out of Goa and focusing on a wellness segment altogether. Many of these other deviations, in the way that we do, I mean, it comes out of our own interest, right? Similarly, any graduate for that matter, because this is more like fundamentally every single person should possess the skills to take care of their parents, right? That is the same kind of skill sets that they will gain when they go through the caregiving track. Now, that caregiving track, the moment one is interested, okay, I'm like, look, I think this is something that I like. This is something that my value wise I'm aligned towards, and this is something that aspirationally it's going to give me a career. I mean, which is not there now, which is what we're trying to create and saying that, hey, look, I think you will be able to continue to do that and rise up and have a very good living. The moment we start creating that as a new path, like hospitality, people from any background, as much as they have the interest, they could just transition, and they all need a starting point. And because to our training program there is no age limit, it's going to be the starting point, and they get that particular exposure, training, and then professionalism, and then they move track, and then they gain their experience over a period of time, right? So that is the logic behind why the transition would happen, and also why it would also theoretically should happen is that not only because it happened in the West and East Asia, fundamentally the only place where any kind of automation would have far more resistance is on the love and connection theme of our human conduct, right? So these are the new jobs that will get created in plenty, not only because our percentage of older people will be much more, but also these jobs will be very hard, and you need people to go learn it and then be better caregiver over a period of time. So in some sense, all these elements that I'm talking about, aspirational, a lot of financial security, all these things are just is going to happen as we go through that transition, like mature as an elderly society in the coming years. And we want to just get those basics in place for that political transition to happen. And whatever we spoke, this is what the response is. On the second question, which is on, I forgot,
Essentially, if a particular elderly person likes a caregiver, they might be paying a certain premium to you, right?
Right.
What prevents them
Right.
from hiring the person and maybe probably bumping their salary? What prevents them from just going down that route?
No, absolutely. See, there are two things over here, right? Thing is, the value that we are trying to create is not just from the geriatric care manager element. The value that over here is the trust for both the kid who's in the US or Europe or Singapore, and then also the elderly people on the functional elements, and even to have a peek into whether the work is being done properly or not. Now, the question could be raised, hey, 1 year they state that trust has been created. What happens after that? Of course, there are going to be certain kind of leakages that one wouldn't be able to control. But to a large extent, this is much more heavier a trust-driven process than even booking a home like Airbnb, right? Because at least in the Airbnb, I mean, like you see the review and you just, I mean, like, and that's something that by and large people are sticking to it, despite over the period of time they could collect these house owner contacts for a period of time. But over here, think of what kind of things that could go wrong. I mean, like someone could steal the elderly person's home, they could hurt, and vice versa. Frankly, right? I mean, the caregiver is a vulnerable person who might not be from a financially well-to-do family, and because they're placed in a financially well-to-do family, if the exploitation of the other hand happens, right, in terms of any kind of abuses, not only from the elderly person, least likely, but then from the kids of the elderly people, right? Now, how do we handle these situations? Now, how do we have the trust and certain kind of ethical behavior that got to be reintroduced into both the customers and also to the employees in some sense? Now, that comes with two-pronged approach, right? One is any kind of feudalistic norms that could be behaved from the customer side, punish that, right? In the sense that you break the contract, you do not blacklist them, you do not give them. On the other side, give high levels of ethical training and then high pay, which gives them the least incentive to become broke. And that's been the studies again and again in all the institution building that you would see in the different places and different societies, how it happened, right? And these are the two ways to effectively bring the trust, and we will continue to focus on these two aspects. And of course, despite this, out of desperation, out of various other constraints, people might take a choice to leave the platform, which is understandable, and there'll be certain leakage, and we would have to absorb that.
Nice. So there's a lot of psychology that you're playing with in this company, in this product, right? At different levels. One is the aspirational status of the caregiver himself or herself. Also, the psychology of the children who are buying this product for their or buying this service for their parents. But what about the elderly people? So I wanted to know, from your experience, do people do elderly people generally don't like to be reliant on other people, right? And I've seen this happen with other elderly people, where there's a sense of frustration on, why am I not able to do this? Why should I rely on someone? How does the market research indicate anything around this aspect? Are elderly people themselves open for a caregiver being with them? Does that sort of diminish their independence, so to say? What did your research indicate?
Right. See, in all probability, having someone when someone is in duress naturally helps, right? Objectively. But there is a strong cultural resistance from the elderly people in India, which is to do with how we were a society, and it's something that East Asia, in its initial periods of as it got older, they experienced as well. Now the reasons are simple. The reasons are that they expected their kids to take care of them, right? And that is just natural in more collectivist focused societies, and we are by and large more collectivist focused society at this particular point. Individualism is just spread out here and there in the urban places. But look at the other hand, there are strong social factors at play here. The kids who are going out for economic reasons to the US and to the UK and to all the other places, not only for the economic reasons, for their various social reasons and their own constraints, they will not be able to come back and stay with the elderly people. And elderly people cannot go and stay with those kids for visa reasons and multiple other problems that they might have to face in the new place. They're far more comfortable in the community that they are familiar with, right? Now, how does one then break the dilemma over here? The conversation starts from the kids' side, right? They are the first who gets exposed. Oh, I mean, like, oh, look, I think there is a much better way to take care. I mean, like, I need not be, money isn't a problem because I earn more. But then, there is multiple other ways that I could resolve this particular problem. I still care about my parents, and how do I do it? Now, then the conversation starts with their parents in terms of, hey, look, I think this is an arrangement that we have to transition. This is very important because it is not only creating a lot of trouble for you. It's not making me go through my own sleep. This is something you should be open to and testing it out and stuff, right? So naturally, the convincing or the aspect of acceptance is far more stronger with the kids, and then they go through their own process of convincing their parents over a period of time, and they test it out. Now, that is why it's also so important when the testing happens, you got to have a very good experience. It's like, imagine someone who hasn't taken a therapy for for whatever reasons, taboo reasons, for a period of time. But then, the way that therapy works is that you go through one or two or three. I mean, like, you'll not be connecting with each of the therapists, right? I mean, like, you will have to connect. It's like dating. Similarly, if we do not have certain kind of a standard and professional standards in terms of caregiving, then you're going to have bad experience the first and two times. People are going to be far more, again, resistant. So our understanding is that as a particular conversation happens between the kids and the elderly people, and then they get and they try. I mean, like, they got to by and large work, and what all we could do to ensure that particular connection, we are trying to do from our side, right? But having said that, what happens in the coming years? Naturally, I think it will become far more acceptable over a period of time, right? Because of the simple reason that duress is something will make people accept the change, right? How long can you continue taking in the pain and suffering that you're not
Yes.
able to go and do things? I mean, like, you have a dementia, or schizophrenia, or Alzheimer's, or paralysis, and there is literally no one to help. And naturally, I mean, like, people then accept the individuals to come and do it as well. So I think where it will have a far more higher acceptance among elderly people is people who are going through these things, chronic illnesses at large, under duress. And then I think it will also then eventually move on to the companionship side.
Right. And what do you think about the competition that your service will receive from elderly care homes? Those seem to be popping up uh, in numbers all over the country. Like, one of our colleagues here, Girish, he's recently moved his mother to an elderly care facility in Coimbatore. It's quite like a luxury uh, elderly care facility where there's a community, there's people with the similar sort of values and cultural upbringing all in the same place, and there's facilities to help them go through their um, elderly life with grace. So how do you sort of view that?
Uh, so there is going to be more space for different kind of options, like, certainly choices in the market, in some sense, right? um, um, there are people who are going to be comfortable going and staying at a gated community, which is full of resources. They have its own advantages. They could have more people who are of their age. They could have more activities, and probably it's equally affordable, like services that we are trying to provide in some sense, right? If we then calculate, there are also segment of people who are going to say that, hey, I mean, like, I want to be in my home because I've stayed in this home for a long period of time. I'm far more comfortable with the neighbors that I'm in. I mean, like, there are multiple stories, even in these gated communities, which I really admire. Indeed, I mean, like, I would encourage a lot of people to actually visit it and then opt for it if that's what is required for them. But I'm going to say we are very complementary in that particular nature, because we just increase the choices. Because there are also cases where when people go there, sometimes they feel lost, in terms of it's like they have gotten used to a place for a long period of time, and they have to suddenly get comfortable in a new place. And certain people will immediately adjust and they'll be able to do it, but a lot of other people who would be uncomfortable doing it, right? So they need other choices as well, and other choices which are quality, other choices that are trustable, other choices that is not also takes away the peace of mind for their kids, like Girish. Right. So then how do we then create that? Is what then we are trying to do.
Right. No, that makes sense. Uh, you talked a lot about a high-level understanding of the product and the philosophy behind why you started this. So let's get into more of the specifics. I think a lot of people listening to this or reading about it will be very keen to understand. So you got the idea. Now, what are the experiments that you are carrying out to validate that idea, right? To achieve that coveted product market fit status. So what are some of these experiments that you're been trying out, and what have been the results so far?
So what we have done is we did raise close to $60,000 from the market and put in another 40,000 from the personal money to pilot the project. And the first batch that we are training consists of 6 people, the geriatric care managers that we speaking about, and they are, as we speak, finishing their training. They'll be coming out in the 3rd week of July. We have pilot customers who have signed up with us. And again, from different parts of the country. One is from Goa, the other person is from Pune, the other person is from Bangalore, the other person is from Hyderabad. And again, both male and female in some sense, right? And our element is to, okay, theoretically, we think that this resolves the problem for the elderly people, the way that we say it, compared to the competitors, compared to the, what market has responded so far. Now, what kind of learning that we got to do on top of it is something that we naturally would learn as we place them into these houses, right? Once they are placed, we naturally have our other partners who are a pool of physiotherapists and psychologists who have already signed up to our platform, who would be available for them for immediate access. What we'll also try is that every single time we create that particular connect, we will also then get into a partnership with at least one hospital in the 1 mile or 2 mile radius to ensure that for any kind of emergencies, they could be immediately being taken care of and relationship is done. And then the basic modus operandi, that information modus operandi that they got to be set between the advocates for all kinds of emergencies being taken care of. And then, of course, we are also in conversation with the community partners over there who focus on geriatrics in those cities, with whom then we could connect them to those communities, right? So we can keep going there. Like elderly person and the geriatric care manager can keep going there for the activities. So those are the things that we are trying to do pilot over there, and then from the learnings we will continue to iterate.
Yeah.
Our aim is to attend to 20 customers by the end of the year, and have a good bench strength to replace geriatric care managers whenever they got to have leave as well. And then take that data to say that, hey, look, I think the model looks clean operationally. We are able to create what we were imagining. Then can we scale it from there? That is where we are.
And how much are you charging for per month?
In the pilot,
Yeah.
in the pilot, we are charging 70,000 per month for the elderly person. So, and as I said, 45,000 is what the salary that we have, naturally decided to give to the geriatric care manager, because, as I said, we really want to make it an aspirational, and we really want the best talent to come over.
Right. Nice. And what are the profiles of the people who are the caregivers? What are they like?
So one individual named Dinesh, he is a BSc Computer Science graduate who has indeed been a caregiver for a long period of time, for the past 2 years in other places, and he has come through. There is lady named Anu who has worked as a nanny for a long period of time in maternity sector, who is again shifting into elderly care. There is a nursing student, who also naturally opted for coming into the home care, and she's also part of the cohort. There are a couple of people who are from general hospitality industry. They have worked in hotels, and they are moving over here to test out the home care. And the profiles are, most of them are in their between 20s, early 20s to late 20s. Only one person is in their early 30s. That's broadly the background. But all of them could read and write well, which was one of the fundamentals that we are able to at least check before then we moved on to our different trainings.
Nice, nice. That's actually really positive. Uh, and so, how are you reaching your customers? How are you currently? What's the process? What's your marketing looking like? How are you reaching customers? How are you communicating your message? What are the channels that are using? I think it'll be really interesting for people to know how did you get these pilot customers to sign up on your platform, because you, as a founder, you definitely, we talk a lot about this at Build3 as well, getting your first set of customers, right? That's the proof is in the pudding. So how do you do that?
I mean, it's in some sense it's a learning process over a period of time. But then there are in our own circle there could be channels that could be created, right? For example, the easiest one that I relied on is my alumni network. Both the schools that are in it here in India and also the schools that are in the US. Why? Because the target customer that we wanted to target is someone who is in his early 40s or late 40s, whose parents happen to be in 70s, who's here in India, and these 40s people are in the US, right? Now, how do we get access to that? Particularly in America, is that I naturally reached out to all my contacts, both in the East Coast and West Coast, and then I got the Indian community groups that they're part of, the Facebook and the WhatsApp groups that they're part of, because there is a vibrant Indian American community who celebrates all the festivals, who handle events on their own. So all I need is a presence in front of these audiences over a period of time, right? So imagine I reached to say 100 of my friends in different universities, New York University, my homeschool Tufts University, my friends were at the Harvard, my other friends were at the Stanford, CMU. Then they're all again distributed in New York and San Francisco and Boston and Dallas and Austin. Then each of these places have the Indian American community groups that vary from spirituality to festivals to whatever, right? So then you just go and tell them, hey, look, this is what we are doing. In case that you're already looking for someone and you have already faced difficulties, we really want to address it. Just give us drop us a message, and we're happy to talk, right? So 3 leads came naturally as we did that particular process, right? And there are multiple other channels that we open. For example, Build3 has a series of pool of both people who are in the investment field and who are also in the startup field, who happen to be high net worth individuals, who are again of similar kind of age bracket that we are talking about. Imagine Varun as a great profile, right? I mean, like his early 40s or mid 40s, and his papa, who also lost one of his, who also lost his spouse. And of course he doesn't need, because he has a lot of other people there. But then that's again, those are the set of people that Build3 gives access to. That's another channel. There is a channel where we are approach all the geriatrics company here in India who are doing different things, and they're all not substitutes, they are all complementaries, because they would appeal to different the customers. We are appealing to different customers, and the request could be very, very different for each of these people. So whenever the prospects of our kind comes, they transfer to us, and prospects of their kind comes, we transfer to them. Geriatrics products company, imagine someone who is already in the field, who is supplying the products which are focused towards the elderly people. Now, that the sense of products, be it the ones that got to be used for enabling their movement in some sense, right? all these companies again have a huge clientele who are already buying these products in some sense, right? Again, the HNIs who are buying these products in some sense, right? Then naturally it's a mutually complementary partnership over here, because we get access to their clients. At the same time, our clients, when they are the ones who buy the product
Yeah.
eventually, right? So these are the 4 or 5 channels that we've activated. Along with it, the physical channels that we're trying to do is we are also traveling to the dementia care centers here in Bangalore. We're also traveling to the high-end hospitals over here in Bangalore. And then we are telling that, look, I think as people move from, the pure nursing care into the companionship care, and if the kids are not happy to be around, if they need it, naturally you'd want to partner with you, right? And there is a sales commission that will be naturally be transferred to them for each of these connections that they make. So we have taken baby steps on all these different channels. And our understanding is that, and of course, you might also know, which is that it organically starts working over a period of time, right? The momentum starts creating over a period of time, but we have to just be at it and continue engaging these channels over a period of time. So that's what we intend to do as well for, having more prospects for subsequent patches.
Right. And in terms of your communication pillars, what are the things that you're saying that sets you apart from the rest of the people? What are you signaling to the outside world through your
Uh,
communication?
you mean in terms of the collaterals we use, in what
In
way we
terms of
come?
the website, yeah, in terms of the website, the collaterals, whatever you're publishing out there. Because right now it seems like there's a lot of goodwill that you've tapped into, and eventually that will sort of expand and multiply over in itself. How are you sort of communicating your message so that people get intrigued and interested in what you're offering?
Absolutely, I think it's about having a similar kind of brief message clear on different items that we use to transfer our message, right? Now that could be a brochure, be the readable, quick 2-page brochure which tells all the things that I just spoke, the art training and our thesis of healthy living, how do we assess what is the pricing, right? This simple data. The blurb that I basically use, which is made like the marketing quick blurb to just quickly introduce us, and then the contact information, which is what I use in all the groups that I have for the US channels. The video explainer, which is what we are doing, which is imagine a simple animation centric video, which is like a 45 seconds, right? Again, it's going to communicate quickly, start with the problem statement of, hey, you're geographically away from your parents and you're always worried because the options that we found in India is weaker. We try to address it, and how this is how it is, and it goes into that particular thing by giving that particular steps clearly, right? Now, so the focus on all here is to be succinct, clearer, and sharper, and shorter as well, right? So that then we just give this particular information to these different channels to then come back to us over a period of time.
Right. And what do you think is your biggest challenge right now? Let's say your top 2, top 3 challenges that you're facing right now.
Um,
I know
what
as I know as a startup there is hundreds of challenges that you're always facing on a daily
Yeah.
basis. But what's your top 2 or top 3?
So to start with, how do we continue creating this supply, right? And that is the greatest opportunity and also the greatest difficulty over here, right? Because supply doesn't exist. In terms of the imaginary Alfreds that we want to create. I know we, of course, opened up quite a few channels, very similar to sales channels. We have to do the recruiting channels, right? Of course, we have opened up like close to 6 or 7 recruiting channels to bring in people to tell this. And imagine with no brand name, with no kind of a presence, people also have to believe that, hey, the startup will pay us, will be able to give us a salary and will be trustable over a period of time. We create that particular thing, right? So it's very challenging to do that. So And then, of course, continuing to get the bright talent who could go through the training to become the caregiver, and they seeing it as an aspirational thing, and they will do it only when the salaries are, rise up to the levels that we're talking about. So how do we do that? Now, we believe that if 1, 2 batches goes and they spread the word, and that circle just bursts, and then naturally eventually more and more people do. Maybe it is, but that is a huge challenge, and it's sad, because imagine, India probably would have the largest workforce, but large section of our kids cannot speak the basic English. Large section of people cannot do basic math. Large section of people will not be able to explain things in a simple manner to different stakeholders. Now that is a huge challenge. I mean, like, I think sometimes it also broke my bubble, in some sense, to come and say that, hey, I mean, like, when you go out and see, I mean, like, it's very hard sometimes, because you see, and we literally sat through 100 people interviewing over a period of time, right? And these are all bright kids, and just because the schooling is not, they were not able to go to the good schools like you and I went. It's so sad that they're not able to do these, some of the basic things, right? So those are the handicaps that we are also as a country have. Those are all the difficulties that we will face when we scale up, right? It's easy to crack for 10 people, easy to crack for 25 people. How do we do it for 200? How do you do it for 1,000? How do you do it for 2,500? And will you have the quality again at that particular scale? Now, I think that is something that we clearly anticipate. So we know more than it's a demand. I think it's a supply problem here, and it's good to have. But then I when I say good to have, probably it's okay to go for me to create. But then I wish we have a better, a pool, from which we could operate on as a country. And so that's a major challenge. The second, of course, the other challenge that we are definitely have to address is, the cultural acceptance over a period of time, right? Now that is some proof, because already 10 years, all the leading players who already have been trying to educate that, hey, this is normal, this is normal, this is normal, and stuff, right? So we naturally could piggyback on that particular education element that they've already, important work that they've already done. So I'm a bit least worried on that, because the durers will take you through and will continue to create the demand. But I'm much more worried on getting the supplies right over a period of time, because tech is pretty easy to do. The third angle which will come into it, which is to collect the data, to have a SaaS product on top of it, and then to start probably even monetizing that particular data and the product to other things. These are all playbooks are already there, because a lot of other industries have done it. We just got to do it and develop the capability. But then the operational constraints are the major roadblocks that they could face.
Right. So literally the aspect of this is, you've actually touched upon a major insight in the state of our education systems in India. In terms of getting there are a lot of graduates that are coming out, but you said you interviewed 100 people, over 100 people,
Yeah.
And probably about 6 got selected. This was 6 that got selected over a rigorous criteria that you mentioned earlier about reading and writing communication, being empathetic, and that's quite a. Like, were you only going for 6 people? Did you want more from those 100 people? Like, would you have wanted more from those 100 people? Is it just that we didn't those 100 people who applied didn't pass certain criteria with reading, writing, communication? Was it that?
No, I mean, like, we aim for targeting only 5 customers from the first batch, because naturally we wanted to learn and then increase the scale from there.
Okay,
So we had a clear number in mind even before going into it. It's just that the time that took for getting these numbers is shocked me, because it was almost a 2-month process. But we thought that, hey, I mean, like, we'll hit off the ground in 3 weeks, we'll finish it. But I would say there is a time when we'll have repeated L10 conversations with the investors, and I will come and tell the same update. Hey, you know what? I mean, like, we opened these channels, but then we haven't still completed. And they would be asking him like, is it because all these channels are ineffective or not? But then they also understood that the supply is very difficult to create, and that's a major roadblock. But then, as you put it, these are things that unknown unknowns all the time, right? We'll always have certain kind of idea in our mind. We try to go and do it, and then you will face these real world constraints, and then there got to be a response, which got to be not only logical, but also got to be, in some sense, has to come from an acceptance rather than pushing our own agenda to just finish off the things.
Right, right.
That comes with a bit of patience, and I think that is always the secret element. I guess when people say that patience solve things for you, patience is a secret ingredient. This is a secret ingredient because it helps you resolve the roadblock.
Yeah,
More time that one gives, and there all our skill sets that we learned in the liberal arts, which is
yes,
how do you message, how do you go and tell, how do you communicate to the investors, how do you communicate to your own team, how do you communicate to other stakeholders that come and play, and probably certain sense of a personal reflection and training one has to do, emotionally manage oneself also
right.
helps. Yeah.
There's this book that we require all new hires to read before they come to Bill3 called The Surrender Experiment. I'm sure Varun must have talked to you about this book at least at some point of your time at Bill3. But it basically talks about this guy who's an economics student who, at the age of 25, went through some internal shifts that happened, and that from then on, his whole life has been an experiment to surrendering, quote and unquote, to a higher purpose, and that sort of guided him, and that sort of become like an anthem at Bill3, where when things go awry, you surrender and you just like let things go by the natural flow, and you do your best to sort of cope with the situation. So you mentioned you've taken some funding. Look, Bill3 has provided some funding, and you've got external investors as well. So how much funding have you raised so far, and what are the expectations from like people like Bill3 and other investors? Like you have those Elton meetings where you're talking to talking to your investors about updates. So what are these expectations from investors? I think a lot of founders or would-be entrepreneurs who would be watching this would like to sort of understand that aspect of what is that dynamic between a founder and an investor?
No, absolutely. I think it's more like oftentimes people will have this idea that, hey, I mean, like, you start your own company, you are at your own free will to do things, right? Which is not true, right? I mean, like, suddenly you have depending on, of course, um, what form of business and how many stakeholders that you carry along to run that. Naturally, that particular equation is going to be changing, right? And it's always, in some sense, a stakeholder management over there, right? And like in any relationship, if values are aligned broadly, it's easier to then broadly engage on that particular level in terms of when things are going good and bad, to narrate, and then to build that overall trust over a period of time to continue to engage, right? Now, so that is one thing. The first step is, do we then go on to choose the people that we associate with who are of the same values? I would take a simple example. We clearly would want to do an organic growth approach, and we wouldn't want to just scale it just for the sake of scaling that with no consideration to the financial numbers, right? That's something that Bill3 also proscribes too. That's something that literally all the other angel investors that I spoke to on those initial days, I wasn't desperate enough. At the same time, I just got lucky to bring them on board, both the folks here and also in the US, because they are from my larger circle to whom I have the exposure and engagement for a longer period of time, right? That resolves the problem for you, right? For example, like when I said, I mean, like in 3 weeks, something that we target, and I tell that in the earlier meeting, and then I go 2 meetings over, and then I tell the same thing. I tell that we haven't started the program because we haven't finished it, and then they'll be like, "Huh." it doesn't look like what's happening. I mean, like, you give us more details and stuff, right? And then I give the insights, and that is and sometimes, of course, people are going to think, maybe you're good, not good, or good, and which is okay. But the point is that at least you have to have the freedom to tell this what I'm facing, and this what I need help with, and everyone understands that, right? And they try to pitch in whatever they do, and but then if you're not aligned on values with the investors, right, the relationship will be hostile over there, right? I mean, like, maybe I haven't faced, maybe people will not face the initial phases, but people might face in the later phases, right? Because the images, the imagination of what the goals are could be different. So in our case, the goals are very, very simple, which is that let's prove the model, right? Which is, get the 20 odd customers. Whether I
Yes.
do it in 6 months or whether I do it in 9 months or 12 months, it's a different story. But then let's have the transparency of the data. Let's have that particular information far more clearer, and let's engage. And we would love to be as much helpful as possible, right? And all the angel investors in the pool to whom I update have the same kind of relationship. And in all these meetings, we talk about the same thing, which is, hey, what happened in these different teams, marketing efforts, prospect whom we spoke to, how does the financial, spending expenditure look like, and how am I doing? And like from your experience, is it the right approach to do? Here we face the roadblock, like what I said. Is there anything that you would suggest me to do? Go and do it. Is there anyone who you can connect us to resolve this? It's at the end of the day, it's not mumbo jumbo at all, right? It's very straightforward and logical that way. But of course, here you have some kind of rigor and accountability element that you have put on yourself with the help of these things. It matters. It helps. It gives you a better way of handling approaching an abstract problem.
Right. Makes sense. And I know that like apart from the caregiver, the care managers that you're recruiting into the team, you sought out a woman co-founder when you came into the program, and you're very particular about that. And I think it would be helpful for everyone to know what is the importance of having a co-founder in these initial stages, and who's in a sense complementary to how you are, and who shares the same drive and the values that you similar, maybe not same, similar values that you possess as well. Like, whatever your thoughts on that, and if you could expand more on the co-founder journey for yourself.
No, it's. I think it's very simple. In my sense, there are multiple theories on it. My personal alignment is to continue to stress on diversity as much, right? Which leads to better deliberations inside the room, because it's literally the skill sets that you could bring in, not only the hard skill sets, but a different point of view skill sets, right? There was this very famous, for long, what happened in the US is because women are represented less in tech world, the products that they will always end up designing would always have very male centric approach in terms of the buttons and the clicks and the movements that they got to have and stuff, and recognition of that particular thing happened very late when female tech leaders who start coming in, because they said that, hey, look, but that's not how we operate, how we interact with that particular street and stuff. Now imagine they're selling a product for like 100% people, 50% of them are of another sex, and then they just do not have an understanding of the particular thing, right? Similarly, every business would have you have to cover all these bases to have a broader understanding of your customers, so that you could bring that element into the way one designs the product and service, right? So I was very clear that this is an industry where two things. One is someone who is also bit closer, bit empathetic to elderly person than I am. I'm in my early 30s. Ganga is in her early 50s. And she has a mother who is 8 years old. I had a grandmother who is in late 80s. Now she's far more sympathetic because she's just going to be facing it in day-to-day basis, and she's the first person who had to attend to it. And I'm always the second person because my parents are always doing it. I had, of course, a different kind of skill set, which was very much business oriented, very much structure oriented, very much reading and writing oriented. She had excellent communication skill sets. She had the very good human touch in terms of, how she narrates things, because she's a through and through an operations person, handled thousands of people before on a day-to-day basis. So for every single idea, every single industry that one targets, then one have to take into account all these, both the soft elements that one brings to the table and the hard elements that one brings to the table. And sometimes you get lucky, right? I mean, it's so hard to find these people. It's literally like a marriage, frankly, right? Because things can go wrong at multiple levels, and on the values and on the complementary skill sets, which could make you a potent equation to sustain through difficulties it's going to come, which you can't anticipate, right? And how do you do it when you do not have much data of people? That is the hardest challenge. I just got lucky with Ganga, but a lot of people, that's why they rely on their friends from the past life, right? Because they have more data of these people and the trust levels are far more higher over there. So there is no one formula, but then the broader skill sets coverage and then complete value alignment in some sense gives the higher probability that the co-founder conflicts will not arise in the future in a harshest manner.
Right. Interesting. And so we're nearing the end of the interview, and so I want you to know, you had a set of preconceived notions of what it would be like to build this in India, right? And so for other impact founders who are looking at this podcast, who are looking to get inspired, what are some of the tips that you would suggest to them if they're building for impact in India? And do you think it's actually viable to build for profit and purpose in India at this point in our economic development? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's broadly this, right? One has to have a strong sense of financial sustainability at the core, and then having the impact numbers on top of it, rather than the opposite, right? The moment you do the opposite, you are far more idealist, because over there, I mean, you can still do it. I mean, you can have money from the foundations and can run a non-profit, and these are very noble channels and pursuits to do and stuff. There's nothing wrong in that, right? But unfortunately, anywhere you have to create a sustainable business which creates revenue on its own, which creates a decent amount of revenue for the stakeholders who are involved, be it the investors or be it your employees or for yourself too. One have to have a very strong clarity on which path one has to take, and which comes in as a very strong priority in some sense, right? Now, once that is done, right, then these impact elements are pursued on the side in a very realistic manner, very shrewd manner. Then you're always going and back and speaking the language of a finance person, right? Look, there are things that's very painful. There are things that I would like to resolve. For example, I don't know, any topic that might be in the backward district, the education elements of women, for example, or socially disadvantaged groups over there and stuff. But then, for whatever reason, you are not able to generate funds to make it a sustainable model, to make it a cricket model. You cannot go on to solve that problem, right? And of course, you will be a spectator. Of course, you will not be able to solve the political problem. But then one has to not become personal about it, right? One has just wait it out. It's like you have to the stick had to be a bit more larger to then use the stick for the multiple other purposes, right? So basically, only the capability becomes larger, then your goal and your aspirations could become bigger and bigger. Of course, it's good to have vision. It's
Yes.
good to be idealistic, but then every single time you the practical assessment got to come only when we develop the capabilities, not focusing on the capabilities, not focusing on sustainability, and then just telling that no, I'm going to just do it. It always only lead to disaster. So that is the 101 thing, right? Always on hey, what is happening in reality, how much money that I have, how much thing that I have, what is my capability, what are the connections that I have, what I could play a role for the next 6 months. Let's not play a game of 6-year thing. I mean, like 6 months, 1 year, let's continue to survive and survive. that gives you the enough capacity to then aim for a bigger thing. So I think that's my understanding of how this should be approached. I would love to, of course, hear from multiple other people as well. But this is my theory and my understanding.
Nice. Yeah, thank you, Venkat. This is awesome. I'm sure a lot of people, especially in the caregiving space, in the elderly caregiving space, would find a lot of meaning and value in this interview. So just want to know what did you think about the interview? How did you like it? What was your opinion on it?
No, I really wanted to continue to share our learnings, not only here through LinkedIn or through multiple other mediums, as we continue to learn. And having good partners like the three, and of course, going into the nuances of what's happening on a practical basis, right? And having the conversation openly. And these are not shouldn't be a close to a conversation on the roadblocks and the difficulties of things. I don't got to tell. I mean, like, what's the worst going to happen? And stuff.
Yeah.
Even when the stakes are much more bigger, I think the conversation got to be open, right?
Yeah.
Now, since that's a value that I believe in, and in the event that we continue to do well and we continue to have more conversations in the coming days as well. Whatever stage that we are in, I wanted to continue to do that particular in that particular fashion with you, right? So I really thoroughly enjoy the conversation, and I'm super glad to be here on the podcast.
Yeah, I was that one thing that I really appreciated was how candid you were, and that I think that makes for just a better conversation and just more insights, and I really appreciated that. So thank you for that.